Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a few interviews I saw in fairly close succession of angry, butch dyke, Marxist, feminist lesbians talking about the problems women face and how only strict and brutal laws designed to control and oppress straight white men, only those can save women from the patriarchy. Now, it's all very ideological and Marxist, and again, you enter into a world of fantasy when you talk to these people, because they make these broad and vague assertions that they treat as fact. But it could be the same as if you're looking at a children's fairy tale, Grimm's fairy tales or any sort of fairy tale. And, as kids, certainly in the Western world anyway, we were subject to fairy tales. Now, whether it's be Santa Claus coming down the chimney with the presents or something like that, or Little Red Riding Hood and wolves that talk, or Goldilocks and the Three Bears, where the bears are talking bears, and the list goes on, and they're all quite absurd. And as a kid, you kind of take it seriously. And I remember as a kid, I was at the time we were somewhere in Europe. I'm just trying to remember where, but I think it might have been in Germany at this time. We were there for a short while on this occasion. I wasn't very old, and of course it gets dark quite early in the evening there. So I remember walking back to where we lived, and it had got quite dark, and the wind came up, and this was not a rural area, but I guess semi-rural. It was a stretch of forest, and the wind was howling in the trees, and I imagined that the wolf from Little Red Riding Hood, or so something like that, some monster, some creature, or would suddenly leap from the forest and either eat me up, or something like that. But I don't know, I was probably 5 or 6 years old. So these fairy stories, these fantasy stories, can sort of have an effect on kids and you stir the imagination in ways. I remember being pretty scared anyway, running as fast as I could. So, and this is really the world you enter when you enter into feminist ideology, because they fantasize about all these dangers and all these creatures and all these monsters that exist. But like in the fairy stories, they don't have to prove that they do exist. They don't have to show the evidence they exist. They merely need to assert it along with some ideological sort of claims. Now listening to one of these women actually was quite pleasant, or seemed quite pleasant, and seemed rather realistic in other ways. She was prepared to engage with reality on some fronts, but when it comes to the patriarchy and the oppression of women, all reality just went out the window. And she claimed the patriarchy is directly responsible for the deaths of all women, whether it be indirectly, directly, or indirectly. So she sort of has this somehow, no matter how a woman dies somewhere, anywhere in the world, is somehow part of the patriarchy. For example, if a woman dies from a medical condition, that's because there's not enough women who are administering medicine, or not enough women who are researching cures. Because if angry lesbians were researching the medicine, then magically cures for women would appear. Now that's patent and utter arrant nonsense, but the interviewer made no attempt to question or push back or ask for, well, how would that be? How does that work exactly? Or just say, well, that's very ideological, you're just a Marxist nutcase. Instead of that, all these assertions were just made, and with the interviewers tamely nodding along. So I was rather surprised that such absolute nonsense doesn't get questioned or pushed back, so just goes straight through to the keeper. So, But just coming through the arguments sort of made and then the information used. Now, again, the assertion is that the patriarchy is responsible in some form or some remote way, is responsible for all deaths of women. Now, they start off with the first one. Well, we all know, the research proves that the primary cause of deaths among women is intimate partner violence caused by straight white men. Now, they don't say caused by men as in non-white men, because if Australia is anything to go by, I think just under I think 88%, 87% of all deaths of women or serious injuries are caused by non-white males. But that's never reported. If you look at any of the propaganda, any of the claims, it's always white men who are doing it. White men and only white men. There's I mean, you'd be lucky to find any brown or black people represented in the propaganda. Very rare. Even in areas of Australia where sort of 100% of the violence against women is black men, you still only see white men depicted in the propaganda, which is quite absurd, of course. But there you go. So and she goes on. So straight away you've got a departure from reality. Call it as it is. If indeed it is a problem, state the problem, give the facts. But they refuse steadfastly to give the facts and stick to their very doctrinaire type ideological positions. So this is the first thing. So it's all caused by white men, when in reality white men are very much even in societies that have that are majority white or very much majority white. Even in those societies, white men still come at the well below any of the other groups. So this idea that women are killed by men. So then if we actually go to the raw numbers and dissect them, and we look at deaths from, say, where sisters kill each other or brothers and sisters. So they're saying, a 10-year-old girl dies and they're declaring her to be an adult woman, when that's not true. Or where, say, the father is driving the car has is in an accident or something like that, but because there's the wife and two daughters in the car, they're saying, well, he in effect murdered them, or was the approximate, the cause of their death. Thus, they then put it into the murder column. And then this again is an outrageous massaging of the facts. So they try very, very hard and use every means and every possible twisted, perverse interpretation to try and make out that women die because of men, or even something. They go to other things like the ambulance drivers are men, and they get to the hospital too late. The woman's had a heart attack or something, and the woman dies. Then it was the man that killed the male ambulance drivers. If all the doctors operating on the woman were men, then the men killed her, and so on. So they use these absurd sort of methods to try and say, well, look, if they're all female doctors, she wouldn't have died. If the ambulance drivers were women, the woman wouldn't have died, which is, of course, patent absurdity. So they go through as many twists and turns and somersaults and backflips and so on, and snorting of mind-altering drugs as they possibly can to arrive at the numbers they do. Other things include the very high proportion of deaths caused by and within lesbian relationships, or where mothers are abusive to daughters. And they take those out, so they effectively remove those. Wherever a man's involved in any way, then they'll go for that. But where it's the lesbians or the mother abusing children, that sort of thing, whenever they do that, or whenever that occurs, they just throw that into the same bin. It's all patriarchy anyway. So there's no attempt to come to grips with the reality. And this is the bit that intrigues me. If indeed women dying or being killed is an extraordinary thing, and they're asserting it is, then wouldn't you want the facts? Wouldn't you want the clear fact? But it's what is clear, that they're not interested in the facts. They're interested in the ideology, and they're interested in producing a narrative that says men are the problem, and particularly white men. Now, straight white men, going after straight white men in the way that this 100% suits the globalist project. The globalists, as I've stated many times, they look at where will opposition come from to the globalist project. Well, it'll come from people that want accountable government. They want free and fair elections. They want independent courts. They want non-politicized policing and so on. So white people want that. That's the standard that white people want to run an orderly, wealthy society, and that's what that gets in the way of the globalists. That is the biggest obstacle, as the globalists perceive, the biggest obstacle to the implementation and the full implementation of the globalist project. So white people, particularly white men, are the ones that want free and fair elections and impartial courts and accountable government. So that white men must be crushed. And this is just another indirect device to do it. So, well, all white men are, murderers of women. We have to control them. We need laws to control these evil fascist Nazi white men. And so this sort of suits the globalist project. And unsurprisingly, globalist NGO funding of these sorts of things is very generous, and because it delivers a result, as the globalists perceive it, for the furtherance of their project. Now, it's when you actually break down the numbers, a very substantial number of injuries against women, again, and they throw young girls into the mix just to gin up the numbers, are by mothers and lesbians or older sisters. So when you take that out, the numbers actually start to look quite different. Lesbian and sister and mother violence are actually quite big issues. So straight away. But if you accept that, then it explodes the narrative. So they can't accept it. So they just ignore whatever doesn't suit the narrative, which is very much a modern era thing. Then it comes to the fact that white men commit, a very small proportion of the total anyway of this sort of alleged violence thing. And so again, that explodes the narrative. So they just do away with all that and say, look, there's the mass murder of women, and it's all caused by straight white men. Now, lie, more lies than lies on top of lies. So we can dismiss that. Then we look at the top 100 causes of deaths among women. Now they play around with things like preventable causes and stuff like that. So they use words to try and jump around here on the charts. But in terms of intimate partner violence, just specifically on that is like a husband or a regular boyfriend or something, that type of thing. The committing violence against a partner that's unprovoked and the like, then that the instances of that are actually very rare. A woman's more likely to choke on a sandwich or be struck by lightning, and these sorts of things. So there's actually a very small or low number of cases of this. Then we look at some of the things that the woman that this angry butch dyke lesbian made was that as women don't have equal social power with men, this is an assertion. Now each situation would be different. In some cases yes, some cases no. So she's saying as women don't have equal social power, any interaction is conducted within the prism of gender oppression or patriarchy, as they assert, and therefore the patriarchy is responsible. Therefore, we must remove the patriarchy. That sort of simplicity of thought, and then again comes back to statistics that are cooked up by angry butch dyke lesbians in gender studies departments to say, well, there you go. There's the evidence, of course, which is simply not true. But this assertion that any woman who dies is being killed by the patriarchy is a stunning piece of nonsense. And yet it looks like it's getting traction. I think it's going to be a useful device for the globalists to further lock down men and remove their legal rights and have these red flag laws. Now, there's already in many countries, I don't know about all, but many countries, there's red flag laws. So if she asserts, if she claims he was violent towards or is threatening violence, or she feels threatened, that's all she has to say, the woman, she feels threatened, she can call the police and the police will remove the man you have to leave the house, and if you don't, you'll be arrested. and then you'll have a charge against you for violence. Now, remember, there's no evidence, so there's only an allegation. That's it. But such as we must believe all women, and that the evil patriarchy and that sort of stuff, that already due legal process and the legal rights of male citizens have been suspended because we're trying to protect women from those evil wolves in the forest, those bears, and Little Red Riding Hood, fantasy, fairy tale. And so they just remove the guy from the house. It could be his house. She could be the guest in his house, and yet he's the one that has to be removed. That's the insanity of these things. So I was talking to a lawyer about it some time ago. I was talking to a lawyer about this, and he confirmed that, yeah, even if it's the guy's house, he says, but often if you can prove conclusively to the police officer that the house is yours and she is the guest, sometimes they will say to her, well, nothing's stopping you from leaving, why don't you leave? And so he said, well, if you're in a situation where you've got a relationship with an unstable woman, you need to keep the deed of the house that you're the owner. You need to have the things like I don't know, electricity bills and anything with your name on it that proves that you live there. And then you can ask the police, well, if she can prove she lives here, that's fine. And then the police will, on probability, say to her, well, you have to leave. Because it's not your house, you're just a guest here. Why are you trying to get us to throw him out when he's the owner of that? That type of thing. So, but in some cases, the lawyer admits even that doesn't work. So you can get kicked out of your own house, and she can ransack your house at will. There's not a damn thing you can do about it other than take civil action against her. But all authority, all the power of the state, all the apparatus of the state is mobilized on her side. The other thing is that she can go into a court, any courtroom, and have an apprehended violence order taken out against the guy without his knowledge, and again, without evidence. So that the evidence bar is lowered considerably. And I think we're going to see an expansion of that, the continuing lowering of the evidence bar, hate speech or this or that. So the evidence bar, and these women openly want this, this butch type lesbian openly wants this because this is the only way to protect women, she asserts. We have to lower do away with due legal process. Evidence be damned. We're in an ideological war here. And it's all very concerning because I see that in the practice of law, jurisprudence, I think it's all going to go that way, which gives the state extraordinary arbitrary powers to crush any of its opponents, and to straight white males in particular. And we see this in say the riots and the protests, where large amounts of Palestinians are gathering, or people sympathetic to Palestinians are gathering, and where the police all across the Western world, in obviously a coordinated understanding, are very reluctant to do anything to stop or hinder or control these protesters and rioters. Whereas if white people attempt to gather, the police are vigorous in their response. And that's a very concerning thing, the two-tier policing. But I think that's the future, certainly the way it's going at the moment. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.